17th. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments or discussion on the minutes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay. Next up is our opportunity for community questions and comments. So we allot 30 minutes to this. Anybody who has a comment or question is welcome to come up to the podium. Please state your name and your address, and you'll have 3 minutes to share what you would like to share with the board. So at this time, I'll open it up to anybody in the community that would like to make a comment. Okay. Doesn't look like we have anybody this evening. Reminder that that's always open at all of our board meetings. So if at any time anybody who's listening would like to attend a board meeting and has a comment or a concern that they'd like to share, they are welcome to do so. So I'll turn it over to the presentations for our capital project scope presentation. Okay, so we're having some technology difficulties, so we're going to put a pause on that part of our agenda, and we're going to move to the finance items for action. So we have 5.02 to 5.08. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any comments, questions, or discussion on any of these items? Lauren?
So on 5.06, the athletic trainer, I think it's great, but my question is, it lays out specifically within the contract all the fall sports that are covered. Is there a verbal understanding that it'll be continued into winter and spring, or are we going to revisit this season by season? How's that going to work?
Right now,
Do you want to Katie, just want to take one of these microphones that are at the table
Yep.
or something?
right now, Katie is in discussions with them because we had to do the more urgent. But yes, she is working with Arnett to go season by season right now, as they are having difficulty, but said they can cover certain events, and we're trying to make sure that there's balance across. We are still going to reach out to Guthrie, who provided me a very nice letter that said, we will be happy to talk to you about the future, but at this time we're not going to support the contract, which unfortunately Guthrie does for every other school district. So we are hoping Guthrie will come back to us as soon as possible and say that they have one, so that they are being equally treated to all the individuals who avail themselves of Guthrie's fine care. So that's what our hope is right now, and we will try to expand it as we get more, and Arnett is trying to look as well. Katie, anything else?
That is correct.
I do have one follow-up. If Ms. Bizzetti can discuss item 5.08, there was a question about that in some of the conversations, that the reason why our building risk is lapsing on September 3rd, the reason being is that we did have a major claim and the company is not choosing to extend us, but they also are doing it based on the fact that they provided recommendations for a contractor to address the situation in a certain way, of which that contractor refused because it's not in the construction documents. Katie, would you like to go into that a little and explain what the contractors said they would not try to provide at the request of the insurance company as a remediation?
Yes. So after the incident at the middle school regarding the flood situation, the insurance carrier did come out, and as part of their process, they did an inspection of the property, submitted a report with some recommendations, some mitigation measures that are preventative for water, flooding, seepage, things of that nature. My understanding is because this type of work was not part of the package that was bid and the front ends and the expectations, there's a little pushback on whose responsibility this is. So we're still working through that. But because we needed to extend this policy, the timeline of the project extended the initial term of the policy because there's the open claim and because of this issues with this recommendation, the carrier opted not to extend this coverage for us. We will, however, have to continue looking at this because one of the expectations of the new carriers, they're going to come out and do an inspection also, and they'll have their own set of recommendations that we'll have to find a way to meet for them to want to bind coverage with us.
So that will be up to Mike and his team, as well as part of the capital project, to try to make sure that we ensure that the district has its insurability on such a large capital project.
And this is specific to the middle school builder's risk policy. The high school policy is still in good order, and we've just signed a policy for the phase 2 elementaries.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? So just, and you don't have to get into any technical detail, but are any of the recommendations of the sort that would indicate the failure to have implemented them at this point present a significant safety risk or concern that we should be aware of?
No, I wouldn't say anything with the safety risk. Mike, do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, so they came out obviously after insurance claims, Dan. A couple of recommendations have come to the district on looking at that. We are in the process of doing it. You know, if we would have had metering on our water, we have it on our boiler system, but on our domestic water, which we're looking at a vendor getting prices and meetings already set up, there would be a recommendation for ourselves. Other little things watching, but some of the things they were asking of the contractor was above and beyond. Obviously, it would be better and things that we'd have to get on the front end in the contract in the future, and that's where they balked a little bit, saying, hey, this is above and beyond. This wasn't asked of when we went there, and we're still, I'm certain it's going to get the litigation on the claim anyways. So it was what things that they came back out later that the contractor hadn't changed a whole bunch, and their response back was, it wasn't owed. That's not really on us right now at this time. And there has been conversations amongst ourselves with Welliver and our team, future ones, what we can get in there to make sure it was covered. It would have been on one of those things that no one reads. I think that I don't think it'll affect costs so much in the future, but it'd have responsibility on them. So what it was is after they had to sign contracts and things they wanted them to be doing the better to protect, they didn't feel warranted at the time. We put in a bunch of protective measures since then, myself, and even with them, and talked with Welliver. But that was a big clause. They just didn't feel that they, and when they say GC, they're calling it the GC, but it's really the plumbing contractor.
Okay.
They keep referencing GC just to clarify. They're thinking it's a general, but
Yeah.
it's a plumbing contractor on it. And we'll continue to work on some of those things. We just couldn't change many of the recommendations. But there are some on the district to protect ourselves. I think the big will be the domestic water.
Right.
We were in that building today. We had one just yesterday, but we were right there, so we minimized it. So we'll be bringing that forward through facilities and everything on some recommendations they have. Awful tough to implement them as quick as they wanted, because you can think about the flood was this spring, district our size. But we're moving forward.
Okay, that answers my, I just wanted to get a sense so I can see there's sort of enhancements that we're looking at and may implement longer term, but it's nothing that's a sort of, significant gap at the moment. So, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. All those in favor of 5, Warren, sorry.
Oh, no, we're in 5 still, right?
We're still in 5.
Okay.
Okay. All those in favor of 5.02 through 5.08, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, moving on to item 6, our personnel items for action. We just have our HR recommendations. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Any comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Our miscellaneous items for action, we have the professional learning contract with 95% group. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Any comments or discussion items? Warren?
Could you explain a little bit more about what this program is? And is it replacing an existing program that we already have? I mean, I read the document. It's about reading and enhancing reading, but beyond that, could you talk a little bit about it? And is it replacing something we already have in existence?
Sure. No, it's not replacing. This is a program that's being used specifically with our RTI interventionists. It focuses on phonemic awareness and working with Tier 2 students and into our Tier 3 in our intervention scales. It's not replacing, but actually you remember last year and this moving into this year, actually 2 years ago now, a focus on phonics at our early levels. This is a part of that, but now to the interventionist side, beyond just the classroom phonics we've been working on. This program was selected by the team of teachers in our central office to move forward on, and to do some side-by-side coaching and to work through it amongst our reading staff. So not a replacement, but an enhancement of our Tier 1 instruction you're going to find in our classroom.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, so let's bring it back. It looks like we're up and running for our presentation, so let's bring it back to item 4.
Take 2.
All right, well, thank you for your patience on this. So I'm going to start with the floor plan work, and largely this is very similar to what we showed last time with a couple of updates, and I'll give a few clarifications as we go through it. So we started at Big Flats, and you know, as you can recognize, it's very similar to what we had before with the core spaces being renovated and a new gymnasium being built in the addition, along with 6 classrooms. Okay, and we further defined, even last time, some of the special ed needs at each building, okay, that drove the layout of these. And then as you can see, there's a new fire lane going around the building. There was money added in here for some playground work on the site also. And to at each building, there's been some additional funds added to further address air conditioning needs. Now, I want to, you know, there was a question before about how far does it go and does it cover? It's basically able to turn on the air conditioning at all renovated spaces and new spaces throughout the district. What it doesn't cover currently, and what you're going to see tonight, is the unrenovated spaces at Big Flats and Ridge Road. And that's because, as we've been talking about, there is future planned right sizing of the classrooms. So if we put a new mechanical unit in each classroom, it won't be sized appropriately for the square footage that's there. So it's difficult to do it, you know, if you have planned renovations. It doesn't really make sense to do that at this time. So that's why that's held back, okay? So when we go to the next building, it's Gardner Road, and at Gardner Road, it's a little different situation. There was a more recent mechanical project done here, and all of the units put in place have a cooling coil already in them. So it just needed a chiller and some head end equipment and some main trunk piping to be done in order to turn on the air conditioning. That cost has been added in. So this building, the way it stands right now, the whole building would be climate controlled, including the renovated, unrenovated, and new addition. So the whole building. I'm going to just go back to highlight. We did, look at this back part a little bit. Looked at it would include a new basketball court, new playground area, and repaving all of that area that you see back through there for play and for fire truck access. Then we're going to go over to Ridge Road. So at Ridge Road, again, same theme. We have the core spaces being renovated, the gymnasium being added onto here, cafeteria where the current gym is, and the library being expanded, and then in music rooms, all your specials basically. And then we looked at reworking this pavement area here and the parking around the back to increase some parking, the fire lane access, and then out front we have a new bus loop occurring here, which we showed last time also. Now we go over to the high school. So this shows the planned work there in the south wing. So you have the renovated space for new gymnasium space, locker rooms, and pretty much completing the renovations in the classroom area along the courtyard here. The second floor includes the running track, wrestling room, fitness center, wrestling/cheerleading, I would say, and a student activity space, and then renovating some of the remaining classrooms along that south wing. And then what we didn't show last time was the site space. So we started looking at how locker rooms out at the new stadium would fit in, and the original plan to expand the stadium structures out there to house locker rooms and music storage for band and referee space and all of those support spaces like physical therapy and things like that, with a site connection here to the new gym entrance. If anybody has questions along the way, please feel free to stop me. The intermediate school and middle school, this included renovations that we've looked at previously for the gymnasium and locker rooms, and all new pavement and circulation for a drop-off loop through here. Okay, and revamping that parking lot. And right now it currently incorporates climate control for the entire building here, because we don't really have plans to change the size of the classrooms, and if we did, it would be minor. So the equipment that would be put in now would be appropriate in the future. Those are the plans I have. Any questions about that? Yeah.
Getting back to the air conditioning piece, I don't think you commented on Ridge Road and the high school in terms of their AC access.
Okay, thank you. So the Ridge Road would be just like Big Flats, where the existing rooms that are unrenovated would not have new climate control with them because of the future plan to increase the size of the rooms. But the renovation and the new addition would be able to be turned on. Okay. At the high school, we currently have systems going in right now that are doing all basically the north wing space that's being renovated, and you currently have air conditioning in the music rooms and this space. The new renovation would be covered within the new project. You might have a couple rooms that are in between, like the wrestling room and auxiliary gym kind of space that, would fall when we renovate the pool in the third project. But all the classrooms would be covered.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question about the site of high school.
Yes. Yep.
So here read the small print. Blue means
Blue is an addition, new square footage.
okay. And does it leave anything still to be completed in those spaces, in a potential future project, or is that essentially complete? You mentioned different types of facilities, locker room, referee space.
Yeah.
All of that encompassed here?
Yes, at the stadium, yes, it does. At the building, there is a third project for this north wing pool and space, which also encompasses tech renovations and potential new STEM classrooms. And this tech room here, it shows up on this plan, is largely unrenovated in this project.
Specific to the stadium and the outbuildings there.
It's everything that it's been programmed to date is covered within this. Yep.
It is important to note that tech room that you were talking about, Mr. Griffin, that would be the ideal location in the third project to revamp a full athletic office, training office in that area, because now it's right directly located with an exterior entrance to the field and to the main south area. So when we get to that point, now we'll be able to close that down and redevelop it, and then put the STEM and tech schools in that connector between the new science wing and the cafeteria, which will then form the big letter H in our hall, the big figure eight, so that the kids can rapidly get around the district and the
Yep.
building.
Okay. All right. And then, I'm going to go into, again, this is similar to what you've seen in the past. This is the process we're in. You can see down there about the fourth and fifth bullet. We're in the progress of developing the estimate and budgets, and the feedback we've been getting is further, progressing that development. The key date there is 9/10. The next board meeting is when we'd be looking for to be pretty well set on the scope to begin the seeker, but the actual vote the board would have to do wouldn't be until October 14th. Now, what happened with cost? So this is an update. The last time I was here, we were at 113. And with these adds of the climate control work that we've done, it brought us up to 122. And this is the overall pre-referendum schedule. So there's a lot of numbers and words here, but essentially we're here at the 9/1 board meeting, and then we're looking to come back on your 9/10 or 9/9. I'm sorry, 9/9 to be able to begin the seeker if everything looks well. If we recall, in the past, this is the expedited schedule. We had another schedule that pushed the vote out. If something doesn't look appropriate at this time, that's still an option to you. You basically have until that 10/14 date to make that decision. Okay, now that's all I have, and I know fiscal advisors are here to talk about the financial plan that would support that size project. Any particular one you want to open first? Oops, I opened the one. Yep.
All right, great. So, good evening. My name is Mike Viscani. I work with Fiscal Advisors, and what I do is I try to assist districts with projecting building aid on scope estimates and look at for ways to maximize. Okay, sorry. All right. Muffles it. Okay, so, all right, I'll just speak up a little bit. All right, so my name is Mike Viscani. I work with Fiscal Advisors, and I was tasked to look at the overall scope and aid ability of the project. Part of my duty is to look at not only the scope, but the maximum cost allowances, which is what the state aid will provide actual building aid on per school. Jeff has provided great estimates for the new BAU calculations, which the BAU calculations, those are building aid units, and those building aid units calculate out to the maximum cost allowances. And what we do is we look at the total amount of the construction in comparison to that, and what we have here is we start with big flats at the top. The estimated cost today is $19 million and change. The amount that's within the maximum cost allowances is 12.8. And as you work down the sheet, you'll see Ridge Road with $22 million worth of estimated construction. 12.7 fits within that, within the available maximum cost allowances. The senior high school is roughly $47 million. Of that 47, 37 million, almost 38 million fit within the cost allowances. You'll see that trend go through with Gardner, and the only school that has basically 100% of the project that's eligible for building aid is the intermediate school, the middle school, with 13.8 and 13.8 fitting within the maximum cost allowances. The stadium and locker room and music storage are completely outside of the available cost allowances, and the reason for that is because they do not have teaching stations, and teaching stations are one and the same as BAUs, which calculate the maximum cost allowances. So the 3.5 would be a dollar for dollar tax impact. On your total authorization right now, what we're looking at is $122,254,995 of that total. $91,402,258 fall within the available maximum cost allowances. Those maximum cost allowances are using the most current data from SED. It's called a construction cost index, and when you look at the construction cost index, multiply it by the BAU count per building, and that's also renovations and additions that we take into consideration, eventually ends up with the total amount that's not eligible for building aid of $30,852,737. But again, with this, we have to not only consider what's available, but what's being used right now. SED has a multi-year cost allowance calculation formula, and they take any project that has SED approval within the last 5 years from the timing of submitting the next capital project to SED for review, and they count them against the available cost allowances. So those deducts are included with our calculations, and as the $94 million, the existing capital project, wraps up, they'll firm up. Right now we're using FPF estimates, which is the estimates as provided at the time of SED submission. But we're fine-tuning that as we go along. Pretty soon we'll update these with the SA 139 budgets, which are based off of actual contracts. And at the end, we'll have final cost report budgets that will give us the more firmer amount of what is actually going to fit within the available maximum cost allowances. Now, I look at that and then project the building aid. The building aid for each of these projects is going to be amortized over a 15-year period. If the additions is something we kind of talked about, getting a little weeds, but if the additions go more than the alterations, then we'll look at a 20-year, but right now we're trying to keep this to a 15-year amortization for the building aid and the debt service. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the various scenarios the district has asked us to review.
Jeff's presentation, when you were talking about the allowable amount of aid every 5 years, that's why in Jeff's calculations it showed when we can get our building permits so that it maximizes that 5-year funding cycle.
That is correct.
Okay.
the earliest SCD approval date that I've been carrying on here responds to that fact. This is when we can maximize the available aid. So it allows us to begin at the intermediate middle school and end at the high school.
If you can sort of go through that we'd be able to begin certain projects by the summer of 2023 or whatever, if you can just blow that up so we can see.
Yeah.
Those are our dates. So we can start, if this project were approved, the earliest we can start would be at the intermediate middle school, which is that parking lot. You never know. But the earliest we could start there is 2022, and then another piece 2023 because of the way funding goes. But it's maximum, it's imperative, districts try to maximize when that money comes on the books because of the situation that will help restart the aid for even future projects and maximize your ability to bring money in from the state, correct?
Correct. Exactly.
Okay, so I know these numbers are small. I have hard copies. Would the board like to see hard copies so you don't have to try? Absolutely. I wouldn't expect. Thank you very much, Dr. Douglas. Okay, so while those are being handed out, save everybody's eyes a little bit. So Mike was discussing how he goes through and looks at the scope and looks at the aidability by each building. And so what I do after that is I put the financing plan to that building aid. So the building aid is the revenue that comes back from the state as a reimbursement. But in order to do the project, since that reimbursement comes over 15 years, the district needs to borrow, similar to how you would borrow for a mortgage. And so we, that borrowing, we call those municipal bonds. And so I structure the municipal bonds and the borrowing plan to fit in with those building aid payments. So as you'll see, and my eyes are bad too, so I'm going to look at the hard copy as well. So as you can see at the top, we have the total project, $122.2 million. We have $10 million worth of capital reserve from the district being utilized. And we're assuming in this scenario that we're not utilizing any appropriation of current cash resources that the district has on hand. So then we have some assumptions with dates that coincides with what Jeff was talking about with what the schedule is. And that's important because those dates dictate when the building aid will start to be paid. So we want to make sure we know when that offsetting revenue is coming into the district. So then I have the financing, and I'm showing the different forms of financing. We're doing some short-term notes followed by serial bonds. So then the chart, that's the fun part. That's where all the numbers are. So we have our fiscal year ending as column 1. So that's each fiscal year of the district. Column 2, we have our balance outstanding. So that's the balance of notes or bonds outstanding in each given fiscal year. And please note that this is a fluid document, so that'll change based on construction cash flow, but we're just making some assumptions at this point as far as how much will be needed in each year. Column 3, we're showing our capital reserve, the $10 million. Columns 4 and 5 are the bond anticipation note principal and interest, so those are our short-term borrowings. And then columns 6 and 7 are showing our long-term bond payments. And column 8 is simply a sum of columns 4 through 7. So the project without building aid is around $9.2 million annually in debt service payments. So the building aid in column 9 is what we're using to offset those payments. So we're estimating just under $5.7 million of building aid will be paid each year. And so that results in a tax impact of about $3.5 million to the district for this project. And in the bottom right corner, you'll see the blue box. So what we've done is we've done an average annual impact. That's $3,574,000. So on a $1,000 full value, that's about $1.53. A percentage tax levy impact is 8.81%. And if you were a homeowner with a $200,000 full value home, that's about $305 a year. Now, notice that this is being amortized over 15 years. We're looking at static tax rates and tax levies. So we're not, in our assumptions here, we aren't using any increases in full value over the years. And as you know, the district has realized on a pretty regular basis increase in that full value. So the tax rate likely would go down to those growths continue. But this is where we are today, and not knowing what those growths are, we just use a static number at this point.
Ms. Crowley, it's important to really emphasize that to the board as well as the community, is although you see these numbers right now, that's assuming over the next 15 years, nothing changes in the Horseheads computation of district wealth for value of our properties. As Ms. Crowley was saying, and Katie does so well each year, our value of our district traditionally escalates each year. That's why last year in the escalation, just in a small amount, our ultimate 2% tax levy that we put out for a vote ended up being almost a 4% decrease in the tax rate. That's not taken into consideration in any final calculation because we just don't know what that will do. However, our trend is our district will value these improvements just like our community businesses, which should maintain that continuous trending of increasing the value of our properties in the district, which ultimately, like we've shown every year, decreases our tax levy. And that means that this number is the most conservative number with no additional funding from the district put towards it if we were to hold steady for 15 straight years, which I guarantee the board we are not going to do. And I believe our records over the past something like 20 years show that except for 1 year, our tax levy has always decreased from whatever's been published because of the fact that the value of the district has consistently rose. And the only year that it didn't was when a massive amount of district value was taking off the books, and that was when it was about gas drilling and gas wells. So other than that, our district is appreciating in value because of the growth that it's had in residential and commercial, and we have not seen any indicator that that will decrease in any time in the near future, which promises well that we can give you the worst case scenario, and it should never be higher than that. But in the long term, if we continue, it could do exactly what happens with our last project, wipe away any local tax increase on the books. And that's where we are at currently with our current project. So hopefully that helps everybody understand we're looking at numbers that are set in a fixed set of time, and that over time those numbers do tend to get better for us. And I know she's about to present some even better options, which we have some resources of local funding that we can use that's already within our budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Douglas. Okay, so this is where we are. I mentioned earlier we are using 10 million of capital reserve, but we're not having any, we're not applying any annual appropriation of any other current cash resources from the district. So if we can look at another scenario, which let me just pull that up real quick. It's page 2. Thank you so much, Jeff. Can we look at the, perfect. Okay, so while that pulls up, okay, terrific. Thank you so much. So this is the same schedule. The only difference that we have here is that we're assuming that the district is applying $500,000 of an annual appropriation from current cash resources. So you can see now all of the figures are the same with the exception of now we have figures in column 10. So we still have the 9.2 million of debt service. We still have the 5.7 of building aid. We're now pulling in $500,000 that the district currently has available. And then that's resulting in column 11, which is about a $3 million increase. So we're bringing the increase to the tax levy down by that $500,000 a year. So you can see that this has about $1.31 per 1,000 full value. The percentage tax levy impact is 7.58%, and that translates for a $200,000 full value home of about $262. So you can see that helps that come down a little bit with the use of the 500,000. And so the third scenario that we looked at is the zero current funds, as Dr. Douglas mentioned. That's kind of the worst case scenario. This would be one of the better case scenarios. Again, assuming everything is static and there's no growth in your local full value. So here we're applying $1 million of current cash resources. And so again, this is shown in column 10. You can see the $1 million shown each year. That brings your average annual local share down to $2.5 million. That's about $1.10 per 1,000 full value, 6.34% on the tax levy. And again, if you had a $200,000 full value home, it's about just under $220 a year. And so something I do want to mention, just to make sure when we're talking about these numbers and the impact. So it's a one-time increase. Let's say that you have a $200,000 home. It's a one-time increase to that 219. Once that 219 is built into the budget, it's there moving forward. So it's not like you're increasing it $219, then the following year would be another 219. Once it's built into the budget, it's built into the budget. So I just want to make sure that the board is clear with that point. So that's the financing plan, looking at it kind of worst case scenario to best case scenario. Again, keeping a lot of items static that we assume based on past trends would improve. Are there any questions that I can answer on the financing? Yes, sir.
So if I read this accurately,
Yeah.
the earliest you could borrow would be 2023. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes. So in this, based on the schedule that we've been looking at for the project, we would assume construction would start in spring to summer of 23. So that would provide for a July 23 borrowing.
All right, and I'm sure I'm asking a question that maybe is unanswerable, but based on your knowledge, if I read this accurately, the bond note you're anticipating is 1.875%. Is that accurate for 2 years? Do you think it'll hold like that for 2 years?
So that 1.875% is within the building aid payment that the state calculates. That's their interest rate component that they'll pay you. So currently it's at 1.875%. On the borrowing side, we have 2.5% for your bond anticipation notes and 3% for your bonds. That is very high in today's market. But because we're not borrowing for a few years out, we increase those rates to provide for conservatism to make sure that if we do hit inflation, if the pandemic is behind us and the economy starts to flourish, if those interest rates increase, we're not coming back to you in 23, 24 and saying, sorry, our financing plan was all wrong. You're now going to have a $3 million tax increase.
And that's important, Warren. In our last project, when we did this, the interest rate was calculated at 4%.
Correct.
And Katie, what have we been bonding out at?
Very low. So right now your bond anticipation notes are well under 0.5%.
So in other words, 4 years ago, we were saying 4%, and look at where we came this.
Right.
That's what I mean for the community. I pride myself on trying to get that trust. I know our whole team does. We do the most conservative to show the worst case because, honestly, it's always better if you can give a better case. And right now, being able to say, I've been here 7 years and taxes are down almost 5%, and we did a $100 million project is a great thing to do. And now let's bring more money back. But that interest rate is the big thing. We're still staying high with the fact that the district has a great borrowing reputation, which helps to really suppress our borrowing note percentage. And that's what we want to always take advantage of. Because remember, now there's extra money built in that if we can bring it off the top as we get closer. And that will help us do more things for the district. Is that fair to say?
That's exactly
Katie,
correct.
do you agree? I always have to check with Katie because she'll beat me up if I'm wrong. Any other questions, Lauren?
So if the borrowing is at lower than you anticipated,
Yep.
then the tax rate, in fact,
Will be lower.
all right, that's.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much.
You're very
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
Very welcome.
And that's a good question, because that's why we're just trying to give the most conservative approach.
Exactly correct.
Mr. Christmas?
I was going to ask about the interest rates, but we've already covered that. But then I'm curious about the two scenarios that we can just look at the current one, which assumes an annual $1 million district, funding. So the idea would be that would be something on an annual basis the district would have to, in its budget, set aside essentially and fund, right?
And currently, the district does have its capital outlay that is about $1.4 million that we do each year. But as we do more building and construction, that need will go away over time. We're showing to help do that with our budget, we can bring this down and virtually bring it to its lowest percentage if that's what the board would desire us to do.
Okay. And as a follow-up to that, let's just say, halfway through, we end up in some unfortunate financial circumstances and have to divert that money, in a given year to something else.
We would have to allot that in our budget preparation during that year or beforehand, or we have reserves. But at this point, if we knew we were going along this in the next 4 or 5 years, we would try to strengthen that financial picture so that we have that opportunity if something else happened too.
Okay, and just to finish could we in theory switch? Like, let's say we're halfway through scenario C and decided we needed that $1 million for something else on an annual basis. You could in theory switch back to A. It would change. It would basically result in a higher tax impact. Or is the question is the whole structure and bonding notes and all of that like tied to these assumptions in such a way that you couldn't essentially switch halfway through if you had to?
You end up tying it to the assumptions because of the fact you have to have at least consistency. But the out-year planning of it, if something were to go awry, we would have the ability within our budget or our reserves to address that ability. But you can't say that you're going to do this in a referendum and then pull funding back and raise the tax rate. Once you're there, you've got to commit to that and then address the other issues as part of your budget. Capital and budget must always be separate. Is that fair to say, Mike Schuster? That would be correct. But we would have tools to be able to do that. I know, I have to be honest. I don't think I'll be here halfway through. But I would hope, I know Katie would be, but I know our goal has always been to put the district in a fine financial position since when we've been, that we have those types of options if we foresee them beforehand, or be able to flex with our reserves. So I would want to say that Katie, myself, whoever's here, that is our obligation to make sure that we can address in those future years.
I don't know if it's just me, but I'm confused.
No problem.
So I'm not saying that we would do anything. I understand we would go out with a referendum and we would have an overall, the 122 million, right? The number, we wouldn't be doing anything to exceed that. But then within the structure of that amount that's approved by the voters, if 5 or 6 years from now, for some reason, we couldn't, this assumes that we've got $1 million a year to put toward it. And I certainly agree with everything you've said, Dr. Douglas, in terms of the financial, trying to put ourselves in the best posture we can and all of that. I'm just sort of thinking, absolute worst case scenario, if something bad were to happen and we couldn't, what's the impact? Is it that how do we continue? Is it through shifting to borrowing more or, raising the rate? I don't understand.
You would raise your budget, not the $1 million, because that's already in your budget already and earmarked for debt service payments. Because it goes to the debt service side. Once it's approved, that's where we'll put it when we start using it. So every year, it's a part of the natural budget. If you need more budgetary expenditure, you would have to either get it from somewhere else in the budget to offset that or add to the budget, which would increase tax rates at that time. But again, depending on the trending, that increase may be already built in. We just don't know.
Okay, I think you just answered my. So
Okay.
essentially, it's in a sort of special protected category, and that's
Yes.
how you. Okay. That's what I
Mike
wasn't
Schuster,
getting.
if you could hand your mic to Mike.
Yeah, that's correct. That $1 million in 20, help me, first line 25.
Yes, correct.
That $1 million would be taken, the capital outlay line would go down by $1 million. The debt service would go up by $1 million. Now that's in the debt service line forever, for the rest of those 15 years. It's not like every year you're going to be shifting it up. You're going to shift it to debt service once. No, it's there and it stays there.
No.
Right.
The debt service to pay the debt of the community's local share, which eventually that will come off the book and be no longer expendable.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think I see what you were thinking. You were thinking every year we had to raise the debt service by another $1 million. No, he's going to raise it in year one, and that same $1 million stays there for the life of that bond.
But each year's budget accounts for that.
Yes, right. Like when the debt service gets to that line, that in 25, it stays there for those 15 years. It's not that every year another $1 million has to be added. It's there once and stays there. Okay, thank you, sir.
Going back to Mr. Adams.
Thank you. I might have misheard, but you said that the annual impact on a full value home is a temporary. This is not a permanent. Can you explain that?
So it's a one-time increase. So on this example here, $219. So similar to what Mr. Christmas and Mr. Schuster were just talking about, once it's built into the budget, it's in there. And so that expense is there from when the project onset is in 2025 through the final payments in 2039.
So every year, a taxpayer would be paying the annual impact from 2025 to 2039.
Yes.
Just,
But the increase
just that
is only
amount.
1 year.
But it's an annual
continuous.
impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. I didn't expect it to go up exponentially, but I just
Good.
wanted to say that this is the taxpayers will be paying this impact
Yes.
fee for 15 years.
Correct.
And if I can correct, they are assumed to be paying that impact for the 15 years, depending on what happens to the overall tax rate and the value of the district. Because if the district's value goes up, which we have a strong track record is, by the time we get to 2025, 26, 29, that tax rate could go down potentially that much. Say we had 4 years like this year where it went down 3.6, 3.7%. Well, even if it went down over the next 2 years, a total of 3% each year, right? That's basically the same percentage point. And you're getting the same thing with your taxes going down. It's just how you look at it, because now you're going to build the wealth of the district, which also builds the wealth of a home resident owner's ability to eventually sell their house for more money too. So it's sort of, you invest money to make money. It's that way here if our trends keep going that way. If our trends went the other way, it's more money. But we have a 20-year trend where it's not that way.
As the project progresses, like the $94 million did, the past project, we ended up in a much better situation than we did when we originally started. So if we continue that trend and we're looking at the worst case scenario, like Dr. Lewis was saying, well, we can take that and say, okay, well, as this progresses and we can maximize the building aid, that'll then lower that local share.
It's like we could ask fiscal advisors, instead of keeping it static, assuming what our trend is over the past 20 years, that trend is each year, we could get a projection there potentially. And I would probably ask them, okay, what could that be? But we can't go by that. That's the big thing. That's the hope that it would be there.
Right.
We have to show what our conservative is, with the understanding that this is where we think it will go, sort of like what we do with our budget. Like this past year, we had, what was our levy percentage? What was it? Like our levy went down 0.5%, but our tax rate, we said, would be somewhere between, I think, 0 and 2%. We were wrong. It was 3.7% negative. But it's knowing that where you are and what the projections, that's what we need to at least let people know, but still tell them our most conservative look, because we always have to be mindful. We've got to tell them the worst potential situation, understanding that we have many things that make it better, and then we have to refer back to this recent project. We were saying that that was going to be close to a 3% tax increase. Well, if you take that 3% tax increase with just the 3.67% tax decrease we just had, that last project is really like a 6% decrease because we never experienced the cost and we lowered the taxes. I don't think anybody complains when we can get the state to pay for it and it doesn't have to come out of our pocket. And that's really where we're trying to strike while the iron's hot. Now that the board has sort of the information, what we're looking for is a little guidance on anything scope related for Hunt. First and foremost, is there anything that maybe we're missing or we shouldn't do, or are we pretty much where the board thought we should be at this point? And I know we don't have 3 members, that's why we're just looking for guidance, and then we'll come back on the 9th, give you our cleanup version. And then we need direction from the board that evening on what do we consider for a potential project. Anything scope related. I know we'd like to have air conditioning for everybody, but that's just not financially possible at this point, but that's the intent. We started with the first project. We'd be continuing this project, and our third project would be in the out years just before hopefully my son graduates. And then what happens is we are trying to get a full environmentally controlled system, pre-K through 12, as well as summer school and for the community to use. Is that what the board wishes as part of the scope? If I can just see thumbs up or thumbs down. Well, thank you. For those that are here, you're all set there. Any other scope issues that we should be aware of? Either adds or detracts? The next thing is we need guidance on the financials. You sort of saw. I don't want to put out to the community the worst case scenario of 1.529, I think it was, I'm not sure. But if you think about it, $1.53 over $225 million worth of improvements to the school district over a 10-year period is about 15 cents a year in per thousand, or about $15 per year. Now, we'll explain and have community meetings to explain that, but that's not bad. I believe that as we build the district and we get stronger in our facilities, the money that we would normally put out for capital outlay, we could help the district and the community by lowering it down to about the 1.1. And we possibly have some tools. But some people may say, oh, that's too much. How about the what was the 500 to 1.2? 500,000 and 1.2. And whatever the decision is, we can try to financially strengthen over the next 3 to 4 years in our capital outlay so that we're using this money, but yet we don't leave the district depleted either. So there is long-term financial planning. What's the board think in regards to that? Should we use $1 million? Should we use 500,000 or 0? Anybody, raise your hand, tell me. Mr. Adams. Mr. Adams is, I'm going to be like an auctioneer for $1 million. 2 million, I'd love to do that, but no. Others? So somewhere 500,000 to $1 million. It might make your determination if we look at some of those potential escalations in property value and so forth at the next meeting. And then we do need to finalize that to really move forward from the 9th to the 13th. Ms. Dale? 500,000 and $1 million? Okay.
Tom, I would vote. I would, vote my support for the $1 million. I mean, I think obviously we think the scope is necessary, and it's a significant project. It's more, than the last one.
This is the hardest project because it involves so much at the elementary schools.
Right. And I think there's going to be a significant effort to discuss later about how we communicate to the public why this is needed and what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. But I think the extent we can minimize the tax impact that we go out with, recognize it. It may go even lower, but making it as low as possible from a starting point, that's what I would be in favor of.
Okay. Warren, Mr. Johnson? I think you're all giving me the 500 to $1 million. Let's look at those and try to zero in. Are you pretty much? And I know Mr. Casey, Ms. Javette got called to work, and Mrs. Corbett, I want to call her Miss Tolerant, but Mrs. Corbett is recovering, and we wish her well. I'll reach out to them as well. But I think we sort of have our guidance there. We're going to focus between the $1 million and the $1 million and the 500,000, and then we'll look at long-term projections of how we can recover from that and build that in over time and what impact that has. And if we can look at a potential rational escalation of our property value, what that does in conjunction with Katie and her trending that she does so well, I think we can come back for the 9th, or do we need more time? And this is for you guys, because you guys are the ones punching the numbers. Do you see much change in the scope and the dollar? You're not going to add more air conditioning on me? Okay. So you're set for the 9th if we can do that. Katie, you'll be okay? So we will come back to you with the 9th for the sole purpose of the 9th, unless we need something for reopening, of just talking about this and starting to communicate to the community. Our meetings are starting on this, and that after the 9th, we will start doing our community forums like we did before. Is that fair enough? I want to thank you all. I want to thank fiscal advisors, Hunt. I know Chad's back. There's Chad and Jeff. We've got a plan going forward. We'll try to make it the best as we come back to you in another 2 weeks after. Well, it's next week. The day after we open school. So, thank you all. Thank you all. Mr. Gill, if you can get that ready with the 4 documents, please.
Oh, I thought you were coming to get the document.
You don't have any relatives up through the town.
No.
One of my students, I thought of that. One of my students is a lovely lady named Angel. You're kidding. So of course, she married the guy who became the president. So we were just up there with me last week.
You must be related somehow, but not that I know of.
And what's funny is a name like this. So Steph works for a school district. His name is Ted Chestnut. I always thought it was funny that Ted Chestnut had Steph gets named Chestnut. Yeah, maybe you are the only 250 people I've ever met.
It's not a very common name.
It's not, but it's just a wonderful student. Good kid.
Funny. Thank you. Yeah, you too. Appreciate it.
let's do. Education guidance, as well as the guidance that has been put out by our governor and the new Department of Health guidance that was put out by our old commissioner, who is still the commissioner, but I don't know for how long, because he sent everybody into a turmoil on last Friday night. That has since been corrected by the governor. There is a absolute universal mask mandate inside all pre-K through 12 school buildings. But at this point, using all of that and the discussions, the district has tried to help mitigate anybody's concerns, either through personal conversations or communications, as best as possible. And now it's time to communicate out to our local community what our plan is. Even though we were only given about a couple days, we've tried to do the best that we can. So in your executive content, you have the plan in front of you. It's close to the plan that I sent out in our updates so that you could see. As we go through, the first part is more about, what is our approach to prevention and monitoring. Tony, if you can move through that, please. And that we're following the CDC guidance with the state education guidance, any directives from New York State government or New York State Department of Health. Strategies include, but are not limited to, constant and correct use of masks, and those are multi-layered masks, not single-layered masks. They are not gaithers. That is going to be the biggest thing for our community, because kids have worn gaithers and even staff has worn them. If they're multi-plied, they're okay, but if they're single and you can breathe evenly through them, which most of them are, they are not acceptable masking in schools. It must be a multi-layered mask. Physical distancing we will use whenever practical and reasonable. Screening, testing, and quickly identifying cases. We are not going to be doing the daily screening, but we are going to have some screening and testing. That's the expectation of our staff before they come, and it's the expectation for all of our parents for their students before they even send them to school. This is a partnership, and we need our parents to make sure they do not send students to school who are showing any symptoms. We have obviously improved ventilation, proper hand washing, and respiratory etiquette will be continued and continuously trained, as that's going to be one of our biggest things throughout this year, especially at the elementary level. Making sure people stay home when they're sick and getting tested, or seeing their doctor to get the reasonable assurance that they do not have to test. But that comes from medical personnel, not from parents, not from relatives, but actual medical doctors or the health department. Contact tracing in combination with isolation and quarantine, so that everybody knows the school district only temporarily asks somebody to stay out. We do not isolate or quarantine anybody. That comes in direct orders from the county health department. You must follow that, as the district must. Once we turn it over to the health department, everyone must follow their orders. Routine cleaning and disinfection. One of the things we want to make sure people understand, there's no such thing as deep cleaning. That was a common term that was used. But cleaning is really regular daily cleaning and disinfection, and that's what our facility staff does so well. And Mr. Coughlin has gone out and been the front runner with ceramic coatings so that we have a high alkaline base, which also immediately kills viruses on contact and has been proven. So we have been doing that all throughout the last year, and we're going to follow many of our safety protocols in place. I know people think that maybe we're requiring vaccines. We are not. We are just promoting vaccination, because that is one of our mitigation strategies. The district does not mandate the vaccine. That would come from a higher authority or from a state agency. So please understand, the district would encourage people to consider what's best for them. HCSD will continue to monitor levels of community transmission by regular discussions with our local health department, county executives, as well as we evaluate multiple points of data, including the data provided by the Chemung County Health Department, COVID Act Now, the CDC, and the New York State dashboard for COVID-19. These are all factors that will be utilized if we are ever allowed any local determination, and that information can be found on our website. But I stress, we can only use our determination if we are allowed the local determination to the board and the administration. And I would ask the board to strongly consider this as a separate part of the plan, as tonight we must worry about opening and making sure our plan is set. That way we can look at future flexibility. Everybody talks about personal freedom. I am unfortunate that I am a district office like the Board of Education. We cannot necessarily deal with the freedom issues. We certainly support individual freedoms. But as far as the state agency and duly elected officers of the state and the board, we are obligated by our oath of office to follow the laws and regulations of New York as well as the Constitution. And because of that, we sometimes can't have our personal opinion in the operations of this agency. But that doesn't mean that nobody has their own personal opinions. It's just that we cannot necessarily always share them in our legal authority. As we go down to the next page, we'll start to go over mask wearing. I won't go over each, but I'll go over the topics. Universal indoor educational masking. We identified the multi-layered pre-K through 12 buildings. Single layer masks and gaiters are not acceptable face coverings. That doesn't mean it's just them, but it's that single layer. They want multiple layers. Outdoor educational masking. Right now, we are able to not mask outside. We still would recommend that in any situation, you have to use common sense. And that, that's where some choice comes in right now. But even if we're in an educational setting, we still want to also try to maximize distancing when we can, because our number one emphasis is to keep kids in school regularly in all their activities on a 5-day-a-week rotation throughout the entire year. Let's help us not have to go to ever remote or close something down if possible. Universal mask use on school transportation, that's a federal requirement. All students will be masked. All drivers will be masked on any district transportation, whether it's a school bus or in one of our school vehicles for such in case as our maintenance and custodial workers. And that is a federal requirement, I believe, up until January 1 of the next year, whether it's extended or not. But still, it does not require distancing. We will still, if we only have 20 kids on a bus and we can distance, we're going to distance even though they're wearing the mask. We'll have followed the school's recommendations of ventilation and so forth. So in the winter, please dress warm when you're on our buses because the windows will be opened. And we look for our bus drivers to lead that way. And for the first time in a long time, we have bus drivers. And that's a great testament to our transportation department, administration, and our community coming out to support our kids. Event masking indoors, because we're under a universal mask mandate. Indoor spectators, indoor events must have masks. If it's sports and you're playing basketball indoors, you must be masked at this point. There is potential guidance coming out from the state that may change that, but right now that is the situation. In our situation right now, we have volleyball that's indoors. They will have to be masked. We have swimming. They will have to be masked when they are not engaged in the swimming because that would be unsafe. In regards to what else do we have indoors? Volleyball, swimming. I think everything else is outdoors, but the hard part is the next one, music masking. They didn't really go into details. The release from the governor's Department of Health on Friday said you had to be 6 feet to take off your mask. That has since not been promulgated in law or regulation. So what happens is Horsehead Central District will require universal indoor masking, which we're required. However, for instrumental music, students should maintain 6 feet distancing when possible, and unmasking is required to play an instrument. If you are playing the drums and don't have to, you mask. Some common sense. Likewise, vocal music should maintain 6 feet distancing when possible. If unmasked, when singing. If masked, singing can occur at 3 foot distance. And is Ms. DeFilippo here? Could you stand up and demonstrate? I'm putting her on the spot because she did this at our meeting this afternoon. You're gonna make her sing? Yeah, go ahead. So what happened, I'm sorry, but she did this rendition at our meeting, and it just made everybody crack up. And honestly, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we need as much laughter as we can have. So I appreciate Ms. DeFilippo, and it's not to make light of it, but when we do performances, we may have to take off our masks. But we may have to consider doing performances outside if we have to. We're going to try to be as creative as possible to make sure our students have the best experience as possible and we try to make them shine. That's our intent, to stay open. And I think that's what the board's trying to do, but do it as safely as possible and follow the regs. So it doesn't say anything about phys ed. Phys ed, you have to do your mask. If you're outside, keep your distance, and you don't have to. But inside, just like sports, you have to. We're awaiting guidance, and that's all I can say. The next area is physical distancing. Pre-K through 12 classrooms, we're doing 3 feet distancing. There's nothing in the regulations that says you have to be 3 feet. It's good practice, and we can do that and be open in person. But if it has to be 2'11", it's 2'11". If it all of a sudden, because of an activity, has to be shoulder to shoulder, try to minimize the amount of time that you're doing. But we're trying to give the teachers the opportunity to teach and the kids the opportunity to learn in the safest way possible under this situation. Hallway and movement, it's indoors, mask has to be on. And that's by anybody that's in our buildings. Our contractors are going to have trouble with this. We will work with them the best we can. Districts get fined per day, I think it's $1,000 per incident. And they said they're going to collect. I don't know. We have to make sure that we don't, and on the contractor's side, I'm going to put it upon the contractors. If they get violated, it's on them. It's not the school district. But we will work with Welliver to make sure they understand. Cafeterias, you could be next to each other eating in cafeterias. We are not taking that stance. We are still trying to keep 3 feet because we feel we can do that. And if we have to use some gym space, we will. We're trying to, again, try the best opportunities that we can to move forward. Indoor events, same thing. Spacing is highly required for spectators because adults, even masked, are supposed to stay 6 feet apart when possible. It's not, I'm an adult, I can do what I want. It's adults have to. So they're masked, so when our spectators are coming in, if you're with your family unit, get your family unit together and sit down. Just ask those people around you to be distanced a little. And if we have to control the number of people at an event, we will. I will leave that to the athletic director or the principals. But right now, we're trying to keep things open for everybody to come. Just we ask everybody to help guide the way and keep things safe. Outdoor events, we highly recommend outdoor spectators, household families, physically distanced from the next group. Preferably 6 feet, but anything's better than nothing. Mr. Adams. We are moving to, it does take time. I know Katie has something with Huddle in the works, National Federation for Cameras. We're trying to make sure as we do it, not just for COVID, but in the future, for any event we do, like in here, we need something. So if we do a concert, even if we do it with kids and not the families, at least the kids get to perform for them. But yes, we're trying to make sure that even down the road, people have the option if they can't get here, because there's a lot of grandparents that don't live near here and they can't get here. But they'd love to see their child or grandchild or family play, and that's what we want to try to present to them. Keep going, please. As we go down, screening and testing to promptly identify cases. This is one of the hard areas. We plan on doing screening and testing. We don't know the regs on it, nor does the Department of Health. They do have money for this. I don't want my nurses, when we're going to have a full load of kids back every day, doing all the screening and testing, and the superintendents in the 3 school districts are really asking for the county to step up with the $2.5 million that they have to consider staffing, that each school gets somebody that regularly focuses on testing. Testing is the one thing that the county definitely wants to do, and we want to help them. I'd ask all parents, please consider to consent if we do Binex testing. Here's the reason why. The more people that test on a daily basis, and that they aren't COVID positive, helps us lower our overall infection positivity rate for the county, the area. If we have 10 people test and 1 person comes up positive, that's a 10% positivity rate. But if all of a sudden we have 1,000 people test and only 10 people come up, it's a 0.1. I mean, so it's really the law of numbers. I know I believe, Christine, we had a conversation. Corning's starting a testing. That's going to help Steuben County out tremendously. The reason we know is Broome County tests every student at SUNY Broome and SUNY Binghamton. They're testing almost 3,000 people a day, and their number went down drastically. That helps us in the Southern Tier region, but it doesn't help Chemung County. Right now, we have the lowest positivity rate, and we're at 4.5%. And that's with minimal testing. So it could go down, and it helps us stay open. So we'd ask people, if we do the consent form, please consider it. It's a very non-invasive, very quick assistance to help us, and also to help the students. So the hard part is if Horseheads is determined to be an area of high community transmission level by whoever decides it, if it's not us, that can lead to potential remote, and it can lead to potential shutdown of activities, athletics. I don't think anybody wants that. If we get that, we will develop something that we have to really get into that high transmission before we get there, because we know our students have been able to weather this storm fairly well, and we also know our staff is highly vaccinated. So those are two positives that the national data does not take into consideration for us. Next part is some simple things. Improved ventilation, Mike does that, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing some of our capital construction is always to improve it, but we meet all state standards. Proper hand washing and respiratory etiquette, our teachers do that, and we will regularly update that and advise it and stock our schools. Keep going. Staying home when sick, this is the most important thing for us, and it's hard because some kids they're sick, but they're not COVID, and nobody wants to go to the doctor. If you're sick, you need to go and see if the doctor says it's COVID related or not. If the doctor says it's COVID related, he's going to get you a test, and that test, you don't come back until you know the results of that test and until the county health department knows what's going on. If the doctor signs a note and says this is non-COVID related, make sure your symptoms clear for a minimum of 24 hours before you send your student back to school. You must have that doctor's note on their prescription pad and present that before the child comes back. That's just good practice. In addition, we have the symptoms and we have the highlight. No one should come if they're ill, but that's hopefully what will help. There's some examples of contact tracing, who's ill, what should happen. That's the next piece. It's similar, but there's some updates where it used to be 6 feet for students when they were masked. Now it seems like it's going to be 3 feet, and it depends on time. But again, we're just showing this, but it all rests with the county health department tracers. And we will work to help facilitate their determination for our students and our staff. Again, highlighted, unless, this is a big thing, fully vaccinated individuals do not need to quarantine after contact with someone who had COVID-19. Yellow, unless they have symptoms. The one thing we're worried about is when somebody's a direct contact, we need to work with the Department of Health, because some parents will tell us, my child's vaccinated. We can't just take you at your word. You must be able to prove it to the Department of Health. There are ways within the medical community that they have records, but again, we cannot go unless it's verified. We will not take cards. If you have a card, that's great. Present it to the Department of Health. They'll check on the legal system for medical and determine whether it is a factual vaccination or not. So please don't fault the district. We are just trying to keep everybody as safe as possible and use the authorities that make those determinations in that part. But that's the number one question is if I'm vaccinated, do I have to quarantine? It really all depends. But there's a strong chance you probably won't. Routine cleaning, disinfection, you know that, promoting vaccination. I'll just read this. Horsehead District has and will continue to provide locations with our school for the local health department to run Chemung County directed vaccination clinics for both eligible staff, parents, students, and all community members. No different than we do for the flu vaccine or anything else. However, it is not an endorsement by the board, the administration, or the district to get a vaccination. It is just we are providing our local health department the opportunity to provide that service to the community and those that wish to avail themselves. Instructional program. I'm tired, so I'm going to turn it over to Tony right now. Mr. Gill will talk a little bit about the instruction, attendance, student quarantines, remote instruction, and social emotional. So even though the social emotional piece is not in here, it is the part of our federal funding, and it is going to be a major emphasis during the year. Mr. Gill.
Thank you. So on the instructional path, let me just say we're excited to have students back 5 days a week. I was talking with Caitlin before we came in, and that realization really hit home when she said that the idea is how wonderful it is that we're going to have students back 5 days a week, and celebrating that and the work that we're doing. And along with that, setting that expectations that students should be here for those 5 days of instruction. And like any other year, if they're sick, they're ill, then there's obviously a reason and an excuse and a pattern that should be followed like any other year. There's nothing that should be changed. There's a normalcy, the positive routines, the welcoming environment that we're going to offer to students during this time. So when it comes to that attendance, it's a reset to back to very much what we did before. We did have a caveat when it comes to those students that are placed on quarantine as direct contacts and how we would address them in those situations. Basically, at the end of June, we had sent out to staff the expectations for the It's Learning program, our learning management system that we'll have for this year, and saying, here's the bare minimum. We know that you'll use it more than this, but here's an expectation of what we're looking for as far as use of this program. And it really will find its way when we get into a student that is homebound because of a quarantine by the county and needs to access the education. And will be provided, you'll see the materials provided, will be accompanied with explicit information that provides clear directions and or videos for students to follow. Teachers will do check-ins with the students, both academically and social emotionally, while students are quarantined or in isolation. Health being the first and foremost. To be healthy, to be able to do this is important. And if it's a quarantine situation as a direct contact, then, ensuring that our students don't fall behind. Now, this is specifically for those that are quarantined. I know many staff members will use it for students that might be out, that they have to send work home. Naturally, we have a program now that will have a place for a child to go to find information. And many of our teachers from this previous year have saved videos, saved materials that can be used again, edited, shortened, recaptured in some way to continue to provide instruction to students when they're quarantined. We do have a 24-hour transition time because sometimes materials have to go home. For instance, if there's a novel in the building or there's ancillary materials a kindergartner might need to use, there's got to be a little lapse in time just so our teachers can organize that, get to the office and arrange that. And that's very typical of what we did pre-COVID when a student was going to be out for some time. We do have to be prepared for 100% instruction, of course. And that means that we are working through a technology order and getting those devices planned out. Last year, Bill and his team did a great job to maintain a cycle of computers that should have been retired. So we kept on an additional year to loan out computers that probably were at the end of their lives. So now we are purchasing additional. We're using our grant-funded money, looking to purchase upwards of, I think last total could be about 850 computers by year end. Just at a current email, we just had 600 to start and then another 100 plus, 140, 150 to go. There is a delay with anything in COVID and timing and receiving supplies, especially technology. There is going to be a slight delay in receiving those. The goal is to outfit and make sure all our carts are full. In all our buildings, we purchased a lot of carts last year, but we didn't have them full because of cohorting. If you only had half the class there, you didn't need 25 computers in the cart. So what we're going to do is we're going to outfit all those carts so that they can be used to their fullest while we have 5 days a week instruction. In the meantime, Bill and his team were working through I won't call it a survey, but a request for technology if we're to go to remote. And so for parents to say, yes, I'll need a device for my child in the off chance that we are closed to remote instruction. So we are working through that. We also last year provided a device letting them know what specifications on what they should purchase if they so choose to. The schedule right now, if we were to go to remote, there would be a slight delay to do process, to flip things, but the expectation is we will, in a very short amount of time, be prepared to move over to that 100% remote if called to. That would require students and parents and our teaching and our staff to be ready to transition to that and to figure out how that might look in their own home. We would follow our normal daily schedule. There might be slight tweaks that could occur, as could happen when you go from in-person to 100% remote. So when that happens, we'll work with our principals to ensure that schedules are clarified if need be. I will take this moment to talk about some of the social emotional work that we've been doing. I think it's important as we have students coming back to full-time 5 days a week. We've been doing a lot of work in this going back pre-COVID. As you might recall, we were doing with something called MTSS, Multi-Tiered System of Supports. New York State is an RTI, very academic focused in its approach to students of intervention. Before they were even talking about it, Tiffany, Kelly Squires, myself, we were talking about looking at this multi-tier, which is a combination of your RTI with your behavioral piece, PBIS, and how that merges together to address the needs of students. Shortly after we started our conversation, New York State put out a memo saying, hey, schools, you need to start moving towards MTSS. So we were ahead of that thanks to some of our work. This past summer, we had a lot of curriculum work done by our social workers, Masters of Social Work. And they looked through those standards and they started to identify what we're doing in all our classrooms that meets those standards. And for those that don't know, standards are typically built out as large overarching concepts and then broken down into performance indicators and then broken out through a pre-K through 12 as what the indicator would look like for that particular goal. So our social workers, along with Kelly Squires and team, went through those and started to identify what we're currently doing and what more we need to do in those particular areas. So that work went on this past summer. It found its way into our buildings, our principals being going to be brought up to speed with work that's currently done and having those conversations. Back in June, site-based teams were set with the district goal to welcome students back. What is the transition for students? What is the transition for staff? How do we welcome people back into this district? Not just at the district level, what Tom and Sue and Tiffany have been planning, but what the buildings are doing as well and how important that is in our work. Excuse me. Moving forward, going to continue to integrate the SEL standards into our work. It's part of our layered curriculum. As you start to work through your ELA, math, science, social studies, you find inserts to where this material naturally flows. So it's not always just a separate thing of character education. It's embedded in the curricular work that it goes along. Also, we were able to add those social work a couple of years ago. Part of our federal monies was to talk about adding those social work to the masters up at the higher levels for a continuity of program. So we have it currently through that pre-K, and we have a shared one at the 5, 6, 7, 8, and having that position all the way through 12th grade would ensure that continuity of those SEL standards. We also hired an RTI teacher just recently to assist with our higher some needs, Gardner Road being a large building, much larger than the others, required additional RTI services and splitting part-time with Center Street to address RTI there. We had RTAs, partially an operational budget, but also support through the federal funding to assist our primary levels. We also had an insert at the high school to assist up there, more on the academic base at the higher levels, but certainly in the social emotional at the younger grades. Been in contact with some local agencies and how do we work with them? Youth Advocacy Program, YAP, and how they might support us in our work. I had a conversation with the director a week ago to see what they might be able to do with us. And we do have conversations in the past about an at-risk counselor at the intermediate school and how we can implement that work at the intermediate school and focusing the counseling strand in combination with a social work strand. And then lastly, we do have the New York State requirement, but something we already hold close, the Justice, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, which takes in social emotional as well. I like to call it JEDI, because I think it's a better acronym, and looking what that looks like in our system and moving forward with that requirement by New York State. Knowing it goes with our SEL standards and our social emotional work we're doing with our students. So That's a lot of information, but I know it's important we talk about and update the board on some of the work that we're doing in the curriculum and social emotionals. And as you remember from the survey, it was the second highest response we saw from the public in those 1,004 responses. Number one was technology, and number two was how do we do the social emotional aspect in our schools.
Any questions on that?
Sure. So those I briefly went over and didn't go into detail. So some of those current practices that were identified as far as best strategies were also pushed by a woman we have that works with all our staff, Becky Bowers. And she's done a lot of work through the remote time and now currently, and she'll be going into our faculty meetings on best practices in instruction to incorporate social emotional skills and identifying. Our principals have worked with to identify those students that are coming back from remote to ensure that transition back. I'll follow up with them, make sure that work is being, identified. We want to make sure that whether the teacher and or the principal, someone from that building is the recognition that they're coming back from 100% remote and what that looks like for that child. I want to be careful not to identify and ostracize the kid as, hey, you are, I'm going to trust the professionalism of the social workers, social work assistants, the principals, the school psychologists to understand how to approach some of those children best at the grade level that they're at, with the understanding some might need a more gentle, and they know the kids better than we do, right? So they have that understanding of the differentiation required to attend to any kid's needs. And let's not forget, although we had fair amount of percentage that were remote, we also had kids that were cohorted that are going to need supports, and in the academic as well as the behavioral. So we're not going to limit it to just those that were 100% remote, but definitely there's some target there that we should look to.
In addition, some of the big things I know our principals always try to work on, especially on the opening day, is trying to be as positive about getting our kids back. For some of them, that will just be, even if they were here just on a hybrid, now they've got everybody around. We have to remember in every one of our buildings, our students, except for last year's senior class, have never been together for almost 18 months. So in a way, it's a hectic time, but we want to try to make it as much celebratory from our whole community, bringing our kids in. And I have every faith that all of our principals are trying to do that by inviting in, like I know at the elementaries, they try to not just do it one day out of the year, but some do it every Monday. They have a different thing. Just like at the intermediate school, they try to make Mondays a different type of welcome for the kids each day. But on top of it, we had our discussions today. What's better social emotional than bringing back field trips? So we've talked and we've highly encouraged. People were wondering, can we take field trips? Yes. And now we have bus drivers to do that, so that's a good thing too. But the big thing is there's no issue. If we go to the Benjamin Patterson House for a tour, Benjamin Patterson House becomes the school district. What do we have to do when we're inside? Just wear a mask. On a bus, wear a mask. Outside, mask optional. We want to start to return as much as we can, as healthy and safely as we can over the course of this year. As such, with reopening, there's a big pressure on us to let outdoor groups use facilities as soon as possible. Right now, I've put a hold on them. Not because we don't want them here. It's because we need a little time just to get open for our kids. Give us about 1 or 2 weeks. Let us get settled. We will start opening up as long as you follow our protocol. Our goal, just like this building, is we're here for the community even now during COVID because we're in a much different place than we were 18 months ago, 12 months ago, and even 3 months ago. So our goal is moving forward and trying to open up and get our district as much as possible back as safely as we can, as quickly as we can. So if everybody will just give us a little time. Anything else, Tony?
Just one last thought. So part of our opening day ceremony with our staff and some of the conversations that we've had ongoing even here in this building, or, in these meetings, was being very conscious of how adults can affect how a child feels about themselves. And we always want to be cognizant of not saying that they're the COVID generation, right? It should be a badge of resilience, not one of, oh, I'm the COVID generation. It's okay. I don't know that, or I can't do that. It's rather, look what we were able to do because we provided a trusted adult in our buildings to support them. And that's what we know from resiliency is what's required. And that's part of, again, I missed that in my overview, something we're also going to move forward with. We did some great work with the United Way and with ProAction on that a year and a half ago, and I would like to see that continue and bring that back now that we're coming back to some normalcy. Our social workers and some of our nurses and school psychologists went and worked with those groups on resiliency, so expanding that and that importance of that single trusted adult in the building and how much impact that can have on a child.
So other questions? We need you to bear with us. This is sort of lengthy, but we have to go through all of it. So going on from the instructional component, now we go into sports and extracurricular activities. A lot of this, students participating in sports and extracurricular activities are required to bring a mask to all practices, contests, performances. Masks are always required to be worn when traveling on school transportation. Teams extracurricular activities, that includes field band, green room players, major activities, not daily school clubs. Daily school clubs will operate under the school rules. But spectators, participants are required to wear masks at all times. That indoors, obviously, it makes sense. For teams, extracurricular activities operate outdoors. All advisors, coaches, spectators, participants must wear masks when not engaged in the activity and on sidelines or in close proximity. This is primarily for our athletes, and we're going to have another document. What we're doing is extracurriculars are a privilege. There is no right and responsibility. You will do what the district has if the board allows us. We believe to keep our sports program going, if the county provides it, that we should be testing in our sports and major activities, field band and so forth, because of the close contact. But we'll also try to minimize that with using sort of on the outdoors, the Olympic format that you just saw at the Olympics. All the Olympic athletes, they masked when they weren't doing their activity outside, just because at any time, if they caught COVID, their whole competition was done. And I've talked to I think almost every team, and the kids understand that. They do not want to be cut out. I just talked to the football team tonight, because in our neighboring district, they have an outbreak on their football team right now, and football starts next week, and those kids won't be back. That's what we're trying to do, so we're trying to use reasonableness. Horseheads will use COVID-19 screening testing for student athletes if we're required to or allowed to. We have to put it in the plan because right now we just don't know until we get more guidance. So that will be explained more at parent night tomorrow, but here's some of the things, and I need the board's guidance on this and make sure the board's okay. If we do testing and a parent says my child's not testing, they do not participate on our sports teams. It's not an option in a privileged sport. We are obligated to protect, but is the board willing to be at that point? So just think about that. I'll come back to it. Extracurricular activities, and this is just not sports. This is field band too. Green room players. In other words, those major activities that bring a lot of people together. It would be like drumline or winter guard if we had it. It is not Varsity H Club that is a club after school. I just want to be clear, because we have to figure out how we can test these, and that's what we need from the health department to make sure that we can do this on the scale that we need. People who are fully vaccinated can refrain from quarantine following a known exposure if they are asymptomatic, facilitated continued participation in in-person learning in sports and extracurricular. There is some things in the guidance that it's recommended that people consider vaccination. I'm not going to say you have to, but if you truly don't want to lose anything, that supposedly is the best way in the guidance to try to minimize it, as long as you are not symptom-based.
Tom, can I just say real quick, just people might wonder why the carve out on athletics, green room players, and field marching band.
Yep.
And that's due to they are truly extra. There's no co-curricular aspect to them. Some of our concerts and the such are are part of a grade or part of a content of what is done during the class.
Yeah.
So they're co-curricular. These remain outside the bounds of any credit bearing or requirements of a curriculum.
Thank you. That's a good catch. The opportunity for spectators to attend events as well as capacity limits for venues will be continuously evaluated and updated as appropriate for physical distancing requirements. That will be judged, like we said in our plan before, by the athletic director and the adjustment. We've also put in these protocols may be adjusted as necessity requires by district administration because this is a program. Obviously, if we did some adjustment, we'd also communicate it to the board. And at the next available board meeting, if we adjusted too far the other way, we can adjust back from there. But we do need some flexibility in the moment's notice. Otherwise, I need the board to meet every single day. And I don't think everybody wants to listen to us all that time. We also included the diagnosis chart from the county for the flow chart of what to do if you've been exposed. That gives everybody a good sample. Go down. And then the last page, district administration will adjust this plan as appropriate and reasonably needed until such time that the Board of Education approves the changes or any changes. We felt we needed to do that at the end so that people understand who gave you the authority. The board is giving us the authority for the day-to-day operations once they approve the potential of the plan. And this is the last page, right? So that's the plan. As we know it right now, unless they change it, I don't think we're missing anything, but wanted to open it up for any questions, thoughts, or concerns. Most of it is similar to what you've seen, and we've tried to cover anything that's been changed. Sorry. Mr. Christmas?
I have a question. A question in regard to the athletic testing. You said you,
yes.
And so I wanted to make sure I understood that correctly. So one, it looks like what we're saying is if a student can show that they are vaccinated, then the testing is not required.
We do not know that guidance yet. That seems to be some of the suggestion that if they're vaccinated, they would not have to test. But there is debate and discussion. That's why we're waiting for the governor to possibly weigh in. That why wouldn't you test vaccinated people as well as unvaccinated? Because there have been breakthrough cases. And those breakthrough cases can also be detrimental to a team.
Okay.
So the thought is that if some people are looking at pool testing for the whole team or individual testing and testing the whole team once a week or testing a portion of the team. We don't know the requirements, but we want people to know that that may be coming to reality.
Okay, which, obviously we'd have to, if there's a state guideline, we'd have to follow it. At that point, and we'd have to make a modification to the plan because it does say students who are unvaccinated must consent to testing in order to continue participation in athletic major extracurricular activities.
Right.
So
that's what we know that has been the guidance so far. So we tried to stick with it.
And so, and you just touched on this, but I'll just speak in response to your request for guidance. I think if that's what it takes to enable athletics I do think athletics are an important part of the educational experience. I think the community and the parents and students would want us to do what we can to try to enable them to continue. So if what it takes is testing, I, for one, am all in favor of that. I guess my question, and it sounds like what that testing might look like in terms of, is it everybody every week? Is it a group, et cetera? All that, it remains to be determined based upon the health.
Through our conversations with the county health department, we just started having those conversations today because they got some guidance. I do not believe the Binex tests will be an issue for us to get. So officially, I think they want, the more you can test, the better it is for the county and everybody. But we have to have the resources to be able to do it and the staffing. If they could sit there and say, hey, every Monday, every team that's not participating in practice will do a test, and they provide that structure, we could do that. And those teams that were away playing, the next day they would we'd catch them every week. They may say, hey, we want to do 20% of every team on a rotating basis each week, or we want to do 100% of those that are unvaccinated. We just don't know, because those that are vaccinated, if they're symptomatic, they shouldn't be coming anyways. And once they're symptomatic, they should be going to get a test.
Right.
So in a way, I think they'll probably merit out to that latter point, that it's the unvaccinated. We just don't know yet. We just want to prepare people tomorrow night at the parent meeting.
Yeah, so I think because the plan itself doesn't have that level of detail, the point we want to make to the community and the parents is that we're not sure exactly what this will look like, but the whole goal behind it is to try to maximize participation and
Keep our
the
program
more
open.
as we learn and know, we'll of course then share that information.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyone else on that? Oh,
I
and
agree.
if I can, while you're doing that, I know one question came about high-risk sports. There is no such thing anymore as high-risk sports in New York. All sports are included. If they close down one sport, they close down all sports, is what we've been told, and that's in that red area. If they went and used the CDC chart right now, all sports would be canceled as of 5 days ago. That's why we don't want that to happen. Ms. Dale.
I was just going to say, I'm definitely in favor of testing those that are participating in athletics and extracurriculars. And I actually am in favor of it being not only unvaccinated but also vaccinated as well, because vaccinated, can still get the virus and can still spread the virus. So just without, with minimized symptoms potentially. So I think whatever comes from the county and whatever they're able to support. I do think it would be a good practice to help try to protect these teams.
Others? Mr. Lynch, you would agree? Oh, sorry. That's not it. Oh, okay. So the 100% either testing or everybody? Mr. Conklin, you're the same way. Mr. Johnson? Good. Mr. Adams, good. That gives us guidance. We will emphasize that tomorrow. And I will tell you, talking to the kids do understand. They have their issues where they're like this or something. You just talk to them, they correct it. But the kids, number one thing that they've told me when I've been around, please just let us keep going as much as we can. We will try to do whatever we can to be as safe as we can for our colleagues and our teams and our students. I hope parents will understand that that's what we're trying to do it for, is all the kids. Okay, as we go through this, next one. Oh, we're at questions, sorry. Other questions? Does this pretty much cover what you expected into the plan? And is this something that the board can vote and say, yes, go forward until another day so that we can start communicating this out to the public tomorrow? Once we are done, I will ask for a motion, a second, and a vote. However, just before we get there, because there's more, Tony, could you bring up just the COVID data right now? That's the long, lengthy one. I'm just bringing that up just to remind you, though my full Excel sheet. Just to remind you, these are the 18 data points. The 18 data points are broken down in the next document I'm going to show you, but this is, honestly, anybody could use this and substitute instead of Chemung County, Steuben County, and they would get the metric for themselves. I know Pete Pizzetti said he would like to talk about this, because I told him I can do this, and if they agree, they can have it for Chemung County every single day. And any school district could use this determination. Right now, as of last Friday, we went from 1.62 to 1.82. We are on high, moderate transmission. If we don't peak, CDC has us red, which means close. Our data shows we're approaching the orange. And that has mirrored the ups and downs of the CDC throughout the whole year. So if you can scroll up, you can see where I started keeping track of the CDC. Blue, yellow, blue, orange, then yellow, red. I just did not keep track of the CDC throughout, but they were, for Chemung County, we were red most of all last year. So that gives you an idea. That data would be used in our next diagram. If you can bring up that extra chart. Okay, yes, right here. Top of the page, please. This is something I can add to the plan. If we are given that local control, we need to define what we're doing. This page defines it. And it says, New York State Education Department recommends schools consider many factors, including local-based COVID-19 data, as they prepare for 21-22 school year. We've been doing this all year long last year, so we use 4 different metrics. And those data metrics that we have used have been recommended by the governor, Governor Cuomo, the CDC, Governor Cuomo for New York State Dashboard, and Peter Bizzetti for Chemung County Dashboard. Those are all linked in this data source, if you can scroll down, and identifies which data we're using, and that corresponds with my Excel document. That's where all the data comes. That data is interpreted over the CDC's chart, and the bottom 2 areas for 7-day rolling average and 7-day rolling average for positivity, those are the 2 calibers, cases or positivity rate. The top line is the case rate, that's why you see the numbers, and each number, 0 to 9 is low transmission. So I've broken it down into 3 categories under each so that we know where we are positionally in it. Everybody knows a 4.0 scale in college. You always have to not just do the 4, the 3, the 2, and the 1. You have to do portions in between. We have broken, go up. Nope, right there. We have broken each portion into a direct high conservative number. Low is really 0.01 to 0.033, but we always code whatever data we have at the highest. That way we conservatively know where we are at the transition point. And we've done that all the way across. The only time I get a 0 is when I actually have 0 cases, I put a 0 in. Other than that, it helps to give a calculation. If you go down, Tony, to the next slide, those calculations are put into the chart. And this shows what the 18 data points are. There are 3 data points on daily number of COVID-19 cases across all of those metrics. There are 4 data points on the past 7-day cumulative average. There's 2 data points on daily number of COVID-19 cases per 100,000, because all of that data point gives you more specific, detailed information about everything happening in Chemung County. When you take all of those measures, according to that chart up above on the most conservative side, it gives you a district transition rate for the whole day. For the whole 18 points. That's what you see as 1.52 for 814. In other words, on 814, all of that calculation of those 8 data points will lead me to an indicator of 1.52 on that whole 4.0 chart. I keep it for the day. I say exactly what type of transmission rate, and at the end, on every Friday, there's a district average rate. Notice it says 1.62. So on a Friday, last Friday, it was 1.62. I can't turn around on Monday and operate. So that 1.62 is actually for not the 21st, but for the 28th, for this week. We would be operating that we are in medium, moderate transmission. This past Friday, it went to 1.82. So next week, if we were using this, we would be on high, moderate transmission. Because high, moderate transition is where they put in the mandatory indoor masking, now I have a reference point of where everything is built off of our plan. When it goes down, if we get the flexibility, I can downgrade it. When it goes up, I can upgrade it. But if you scroll down in the plan, we'll also show exactly each week. Sue puts this up on our website. We communicate our COVID cases. You would see it that for the week of 8/14 to 8/20, we're at 1.62. Next week, Sue, I think, actually put it up already. It's at 1.82 for this week. And that's how you would track it. Why is this all important? Is that on this one too, if you go down farther? The rubric. Yes. The reason this is important is because if we look for decision making that is more objective based and not subjective, we have our rubric and it's divided up. We know the scale. We could virtually put the scale there and say what restriction level we are at each one. And I think that was really the conversation at the last one. It wasn't that we were against or for masking one way or another. It's that if we can have flexibility, what would that look like? So I'm trying to prognosticate into the future because the governor yesterday said as soon as she can, she's going to try to give it to local control. Unfortunately, she said local health departments, not us. I do believe the health departments will push back and say, no, put it on the schools. I don't blame them. But we want to be ready. This is not ready, but the concept is there. So if you scroll down one, like, keep going down. Man. Nope. No, that's restriction one. Go down a little farther. I think I doubled it up there. Say athletic masking. In blue, no restrictions, masking optional. That seems to be where we were all summer long. Yellow, masking required at practices and on sideline, but optional during competition for low options. That's just good practice. But if we agreed that that's where it would be. Medium, same exact thing. High, same exact thing. Now that we know it, that I might have to change that one that says outdoors, masking required at practice and on sidelines, but optional during competition. Indoors, masking required for everything. But do you see how I can manipulate that across by using that one point of high yellow as the standard adjudicating point of when the state stepped in? Now if it goes up, it might be that middle orange, it might be we're going to mask indoors and we're going to mask outdoors. And we're going to mask during competitions at both. But what I'm trying to tell the board, does that sound like the right concept to further develop? Doug? Yes, Nick?
Those recommendations on the athletic participation in the masking, those come from the CDC?
Those are what, how would you say? The CDC is much harsher because at red, we would absolutely be closed.
Right.
I don't think we want to get there. But that's if we get local control and we have control over what we're interpreting as the data. We're using the CDC's guidance, but we're also setting it for our local situation.
No, I'm just saying, based on the color coding,
Yes, yes.
that is the CDC's
The color
recommendation.
coding and the breakdown of like 0 through 9 cases, everything there is exactly by the CDC's metric. Just how we determine it is not based on only national PCR testing and nationally reported cases. We
Right.
take the national Johns Hopkins data, state data for the county, and local data for the county, and all three of them paint a much clearer picture united together.
I mean, I know that the CDC coding for education in the red zone is mandatory cohorting, which is just a whisker away from closing the schools anyway,
Right.
probably.
And if Tony, can you go up to the first one? Because that brings up a good point, because I'm trying to prevent that as much as possible. But if you know, I was trying to do this in my mind with restrictions. No restrictions, masking optional, but recommended inside. Mandatory masking inside, optional outside. Mandatory masking in, I gotta put my glasses on, sorry. Mandatory masking inside, outside, prepare for 6-foot distancing is the low. Middle is mandatory masking inside, outside, move to 6-foot distancing or remote. We can't move to 6-foot distancing, so at middle red, we are remote. It moves us there. And that's what I mean. I need time to work this piece out, all of it across, and if we just didn't have enough time, if I can do that, we'll get together and then send it out to proof for the board so you can see it, and then we bring it to the 9th as well.
Yeah, I guess my only point is if schools are going to be closed, there's no in-person athletics, I would think.
Oh, I think you have to put athletics are shut down too.
Right.
What it is I want to define each row going across more detailed. So, like, if we do masking, we'd probably say masking and then say indoor, outdoor. If we do athletics, extracurricular, this is what happens here. We've just got to refine all those categories, so to speak.
Right. I guess, yeah, we would ramp up the protections until we get to a certain point. Then likely in-person school and sports are both all shut down.
Yes. But I will tell you, if we followed our data from last year, we got the high, medium, orange at the most over the year, but CDC had us closed the whole year. And yet we were open, just that we were closed because of the New York State. So I think using some of that historical data helps to frame where we could be.
Yeah, I understand, and I approve of using multiple measures. I just think we should we should look at what each level, what the action would be on each level. And, sports are at least as equivalent as in-person instruction.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're remote at all, sports is off the table in my book at that point. So we just need to make sure those match up.
And that's the funny thing. Last year, remember, they said sports could go on even if you're at remote, which I didn't understand, but we will get pushback there. We will. I think you and I are on the same page. We just got to try to figure out what that looks like.
Right.
Okay, Ms. Dale.
So I like where you're going with this, and I think it's a really good starting point. I think though, it would be, if it gets to local control, I feel like there needs to be some sort of consistency across the districts that are within our range.
That is the hard part. I will tell you, there will be no consistency apart the districts. I know one district that's going to seat at 3 feet and unmask, and I don't know how they're going to do it. I've advised them as a senior superintendent, saying if you do that, you could face losing your certification. I hope they listen, but I can't, I hate to say it. I want to help every district be unified. I do believe Hillary's attempt, my attempt, and Mike is to do that. If it gets to individual control, every district has its own pressure points.
Right.
I know, like right now, we have no remote. Not a lot of people are asking for remote. But I know in other districts that they are asking for remote, and that's going to be their pressure point.
Okay.
But we'll try to be, I know all the superintendents, we've tried to tell everybody, there's safety in numbers, but we're also, it's like calling a snow day. We're trying to be as consistent as possible. And it appears that it's holding right now. But I do fear once it goes to absolute local control, if it's county health departments, that's easier for us to be consistent. If it goes to individual districts, you will see a wide variety of plans, because I already know one small district that is going to go their own way already.
Yeah, I guess
Because they can go to 6 feet, and they're saying they can take their masks off when they can't.
I guess I'm not overly optimistic that it will get to the school district's control.
I just want to be prepared,
Right.
and I also want our community to know that we're trying to fight for them, but we have limits to what we can fight for,
Right.
because no matter what, we're obligated to follow the laws of New York State. Other questions? Does this sound like we're on the right track, though, Mr. Christmas?
Yeah, I think we're on the right track. I mean, I'm supportive of the plan as a whole. I said last time that I think our primary objective is to keep school open and keep kids safe, and the plan is intended to do that in a, reasonable way, right? So the fact that we're starting with masking, we're taking the precautions and it's a big if we're given the local control and we have the ability to implement some kind of a structure like you're showing, then it seems right to me. I agree with Doug that I think we just need to make sure we've kind of gone through it quickly and there's a whole lot there. So we've got to make sure it all comes together and reconcile it. But in general, I'm supportive, and I think, the plan strikes the right balance. And, it's directed toward those twin goals of safety and keeping us open. So I'm supportive.
So what we'll try to do is work on this more. Our number one, and it might be the 9th, it might be the September meeting. Our number one priority after tonight is to get our number one goal for the district this year is to get open and try to stay open as safely as possible for all students in person. Our number 2 goal is to try to make sure that we're addressing our capital issues and getting ready for the board's requirements of that. And then our 3rd goal is to try to get our instructional professional development up and running to where it was pre-COVID. And obviously our annual goal of making sure we try to get into a financial strength point, continuing our 6-7 year tradition will be our focus for this year. And we'll put that down. Mr. Adams. Once the board approves this plan, we start developing our communication out tomorrow to let them know. We will have in there that the bus planning will be starting to be released on Friday. We have to let them know that last year we were given 4 weeks. This year we were given a week. And let them know, please contact your principals, but here is our plan. Here is what's expected. Here is the masking. Let's get our kids back in here and let's make each day better for the kids. I know Sue's already thinking about it because she already told me today. We already have that ready and trying to get ready to go for a communication out tomorrow. Anything else from the board? Tony, I don't have another document, do I? Oh, athletic, if you could put that one up there, please. I know this is for, he had to go home. Mr. DeTabe still? He was, but he had to go home. I know you heard most of this stuff. Mr. DeTabe, and we've got to correct this because he's got distancing of 3 feet, but he is going to be setting this into motion so parents know it for visiting teams as well as spectator policies. Indoor policies, spectators are masked. Outdoors, no masks are required, but are highly recommended. We will align this with our plan tonight to tomorrow. But this is sort of his blush at how we're going to put it out so that parents get it tomorrow for limits, distancing, procedures upon arrival and contact tracing, as well as what we can put up for visiting team procedures so that visiting teams know that indoor contests, they must do this. Their benches must be socially distanced. They have to be aware that locker rooms and stuff are still under protocol, and so that we can be as professional to them. And here's the thing, once we put in ours, if we travel and the other team doesn't have anything, we still go by our protocols. There is nothing that says you have to be masked yet to play, so I don't think that will be problematic unless we get to a point where we must require masks. If we require masks and another county does not, we will go by our rules wherever we play. Does that seem to make sense to everybody? And we will get this in line with our plan. Okay. Those are our 4 documents. You kind of got Tony and me at the same time talking as long as possible. We apologize, but this is really the bulk of our work in a very short time. We want to thank you for your time. If there are no more questions, Tony, could you put up the plan, please? This plan is what would be needed as a motion for the Board of Education to approve to move forward with at this time. If you can capture that, Candy. Thank you. Oops, I took somebody's microphone. There you go, Warren.
Okay, so we need a motion. So on the table is, we need a motion to approve this plan.
So moved.
Any additional comments or discussion around the plan that was presented? And this is just the plan, not the rubric or anything if it comes to local control. That's not on the table for approval. That's just a draft that we're starting. The only thing we're approving tonight is this 10-page document plan. Any more comments? The only comment I have, as I was sitting there seeing it big on the screen, there are like a couple typos and stuff like that. So I'm assuming.
Who hasn't had a chance to look at it?
I'm assuming that. I'm assuming Sue will go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and yeah. So there was just a few I noticed. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving this opening plan, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, great.
Thank you.
Next up on our agenda is, I'm just going to open it up to any board member comments.
Committee structure starts next month, so everybody be prepared.
The what start?
Committee structure.
Oh,
for
committees.
Finance, we're getting
Right.
ready to get into the swing. So
Right.
I know Ms. DeFilippo was sending out meeting minutes or meeting appointments all night long.
Okay. Brian?
just have one quick comment on the health and safety guide. I want to thank the whole team that worked on that. It is a huge document, a lot of details. You guys did not have much time to put it together, so thank you very much for putting it together very thoroughly, very detailed, very understandable. I know the communication to the parents will be a kind of a consolidated version of this, but thank you very much for all the hard work.
Any other comments? I just want to echo what Brian said. Definitely a lot of work, and it's hard when you were trying to do work just in time, right? But when things come to us late, then everybody's kind of rush to get things done. So thank you for all of that, and I appreciate the patience that our community has had and our parents have had in waiting for this to come out. I know it's not ideal for it to come out right before, just days before school is going to start, but it is what it is, and I know that communication will come out really quickly tomorrow. And then the other thing I just want to say is, I'm excited. 5 days next week, so that's really, really exciting that we're going to get to have all the students in the buildings. We've had some ups and downs, obviously, over the past 18 months. A lot of emotions. But I think, let's just have 100% optimism going into next week and be absolutely encouraging to all of our staff, all of our students, and thumbs up for a really positive start of the school year. So thank you for everybody who's put in a ton of work getting ready. I'm really excited for staff opening day on Tuesday, and then also for the students to be back on Wednesday.
And if I can add, on staff opening day, we will, of course, watch the weather right now because it's turning wet, but it was dry for a long time. But if we have to, because of the sheer numbers of our district, if it is wet, we will move it to a virtual opening day. So please look for that either Monday night or sometime Monday on Labor Day, as we'll have to make that call. And then on top of it, on Friday will be the first of night games, and I know Mr. Dete is working with other vendors about how we open the stadium for each of the events, trying to make sure it's special for each of the kids as we get football, soccer on it at this point, and each time throughout the year that we have a new team going on it, we are trying to target that first night for them as being special. He's already got a shirt he's getting ready to make that says, it's basically Horseheads, welcome to our house, and he's going to put I think he's trying to work now on the logos for each of our athletic teams and field bands so that it's our house. So I commend him on his first start here as we try to build off of everything that we're doing.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all we have. So we don't need to go back into executive session. So if I can have a motion to officially adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? All right. See you all next Wednesday.
Thank you,
Or next
ladies and
Thursday.
gentlemen. This concludes our special Board of Education meeting. Our next special Board of Education meeting for the purpose of capital construction, we invite everybody to attend, will be on the evening of September 9th, starting at 6 o'clock for a potential presentation and final calculations of cost structure as we prepare the board for its discussion on if we move forward with the next portion of Horseheads 2030, which would be the phase of continuing the build. Thank you very much. We appreciate everybody's time.